Assalamualaikum. Thank you very much for inviting me to the Manias. How many of you are students here? Faculty? Who are you?
We're with the Sabeen Mahmud Foundation.
Okay, welcome. Okay, I knew Sabeen, with which I made a presentation on suicide. I was going to make another one on mental health. Fortunately, Sabeen passed away, so I'm very happy to be here and very happy to meet you. So this really is in some ways a tribute to Sabeen and a legacy. It's a wonderful project you're doing. I hope you have more success. I think the best kind of reward we can give to Sabeen is to carry on the work in every way that we can. So I'm going to talk on suicide and self-harm. I just wanted to set the stage of what it is. Obviously, people talk about a lot, and I'm sure a lot of you know quite a lot about it. And I, as a psychiatrist, as a researcher, probably look at it a little differently. Because I'm also a clinician, I see patients and I do research. Perhaps I can see both sides. Some researchers are very, very detached from what is actually happening with individuals, and some clinicians don't do any research. So I try and straddle that divide between clinicians, see patients, but also look at the problem from the researcher's point of view. But I also had the great fortune of being part of the International Association for Suicide Prevention. I'm the former president. I now finished in 2017, but I'm still with the foundation, the association. So that has given me a kind of a wider perspective of what's happening at the global level, what's happening in the region, in India, Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, Iran, and how does Pakistan relate to these countries. And it is very important because this is not just a Pakistani problem. It is a worldwide problem. I want to start by sharing with you 2 or 3 cases. This is young Abdul Mubin, class 7. I think he would be about 12 or 13, studying in a hostel boarding school in Ahmedabad. And in May 2012, he killed himself. It's very unusual because children of 12 and 13 don't really kill themselves. It's usually older adolescents. And also quite interestingly, he left a suicide note in which he says that to his mother, which he says that मैं खतरे का हूँ माँ, तो मैं तो मर गया हूँ, school में मेरी सारी चीजें लेकर आना है. Then he advises his mother not to send his sisters to the boarding school. He goes on to say, I like life, but I can't stand the hostel life. This is all there was. And it made, as they do, breaking news for 48 hours or less than that, and then it vanished. No one knows what happened, what were the reasons behind it. One can make a kind of an educated guess, having been in this field for so long, and being, like I said, a psychiatrist. We know abuse of children in these boarding schools is rampant. So that may be one of the things. There may be problems at home with his parents and any other thing. There may have been peer problems, may have been bullying, we don't know. But these are some of the issues that needed to be explored. It's very important to explore these because unless you know what is happening, what are the causes, you can't really prevent these things. You need to have good evidence. So each suicide, like each fatal air crash, must be investigated very thoroughly. And then whatever you find, you put that in the system. Another example of a young person, Sakiba Kakar, of 17 years old in Balochistan. She killed herself because the principal rejected the examination forms. She had earlier questioned some of the decisions of the principal. She was pretty outspoken, and I must say she had a lot of courage. And so this was the principal's way of getting back at her. And she killed herself, and she left her short suicide note saying, "Ab khush ho ja, main nahi aungi tere imtihan mein, दुश्मन जान करके मौत से आना इम्कान मैशर में तेरा मुकाबला है मुझसे, something like that. So she killed herself in response to that. And then you have this young lady, Roshan Farooq. So these are all, by the way, either on social media or on the electronic or the print media, so I've picked up from there. So there's nothing confidential about this. It's already out there. Roshan Farooq was a young lady at Beacon House University in Lahore, and she killed herself by jumping off from the fourth or fifth floor. And she had posted, there's a really cryptic message on social media before she did that, with this picture actually. I killed myself anytime soon, just remember me like this, just in this sari on a spring afternoon, looking so happy and too happy. She was giving out messages out there, of course, no one picked it up, it's too late. So the big question about suicide prevention is, could these three suicides of these young people be prevented? I know there have been some suicides in Indus as well as they have been at AKU, as they have been at the Ivy League institution in the US as well. Could they have been prevented? The answer is yes. Vast majority of suicides can be prevented. But to do that, we must have systems in place. We need to identify the problems early on, offer help at college level, institution level, maybe at a professional level. And people should know where and how to seek help. So counselors should know who to call on if things get beyond them. What is the referral pathway? So this is very important. Honestly, a crisis intervention is very important in terms of the endpoint. So when you talk about suicidal behavior, it includes suicide, the act of killing oneself intentionally, then people who make an attempt will survive. Terms of its use, attempted suicide, parasuicide, deliberate self-harm, not fatal, deliberate self-harm. The term that is used nowadays in fashion is just self-harm. And then you have suicidal thoughts, feelings, and ideations of people having thoughts of killing themselves. So for every suicide, there are at least 10 to 20 people who attempt suicide and 100 people who think of killing themselves. So 100 people who think of killing themselves, 10 and 20 actually go on to make an attempt at a suicidal population level, and then one dies from that. This is a kind of a rough ratio if you want to study suicide. But when this event happens, then at least it has been estimated that at least 40 people, close family members, locally friends, are affected directly by suicide. Some of them actually go on to develop complex psychological problems themselves. I mean, death of any kind is traumatic, particularly of a young person, an unnatural death, accidents, or illness. But suicide, because of its connotation of self-inflicted wound, where the person may not have any medical or physical illness, has not met with an accident, but has done something to himself, it's really difficult to understand. So the effects, psychological effects of some of this death, suicidal death, is much more profound than death by other things. I mean, like I said, death by any means is, young person is traumatic, but suicide has special connotations. So it is something that has happened throughout history. It's not only now that we are waking up to it. It happens in all societies, all religions, races, class, and all phases of the life cycle, except the very young, like I said, but it goes right up to the old age. What the difference is the differences in countries, between countries, regions of the countries, continents, and so on. And so, for example, Islamic countries traditionally had very low suicide rates, and the high suicide rates were in the Protestant Christian countries, which was lesser than the Catholic countries. Jewish had even lesser rates than even Islamic countries, but they vary. And then the groups that are affected more also vary. So then there are differences, and that's why it's important to study local factors while learning from the global factors. It's a very complex and very challenging phenomenon to study and to control and intervene, because there's no one factor that leads to suicide. There's not one failure in an exam or one broken love affair that leads to suicide. It's all of these things: biological factors, genetic factors, psychological factors, the types of coping mechanisms people have, resiliency, and so on. Social factors: what is the social support like? What are the social norms? How much has the person veered out of the social norm? And the connotations of stigma and then loss of face, and then obviously personal factors. How well integrated the person's personality is, how fragile it is. So all of these things are very important, which come together at a certain point in time and makes the person suicidal. So worldwide, about 7.7 million, 7 lakh people kill themselves every year. This figure has come down from about 1 million to 0.7 million, and the reason is because a lot of Western countries have invested very heavily in suicide prevention programs and mental health. So Western Europe, North America, Australia, New Zealand, they've invested very heavily in it's come down. But the country that has really shown remarkable decrease in suicide rates for the last 10 years, come down about 60%, is, anyone guess? Sweden, no.
Canada.
No.
It's not Western.
It's one of our all weather friends.
China. Okay,
China. So China has shown a remarkable decrease in suicide rates over the last decade, and the reason is outside the health of the mental system. It's all to do with the socioeconomic prosperity that China has enjoyed. Millions of people have come out of poverty. They have migrated from the rural areas to the urban areas, and that's why the cities are growing. So it is very interesting how China's suicide rates have come down. So one has to really think what we should be investing in. Low middle income countries like Pakistan, India, and many countries of Africa and South America, they contribute 80% of the world's suicide. Of these 700,000, 80% are in these countries. And China and India, because of being very large population, they contribute 40%. Okay, so worldwide, more men than women kill themselves, although more women attempt it. So more women attempt suicide, but more men die by suicide. It's a paradox, and that has very interesting connotations. Young people and the elderly, so there are two peaks. Young people between 15 and 25 and the very old. The difference of Pakistan that I'll show you a little later. Marriage is very protective against suicide. So any kind of a relationship is protective. Again, Pakistan shows some differences. So divorced, single, and widowed people are more at risk. Employment, loss of job. Social class, the very low social class, and the very high. This is global data, please remember, that's not from Pakistan. Research over the last 7 years have shown that one condition that really stands out amongst all other psychiatric disorders is clinical depression. When I say clinical depression, this is a psychiatric condition. This is not the depression you feel because of the political situation in the country or because you've lost your iPhone or whatever. That's not depression. Okay? So people use the term depression. I'm talking of clinical depression, which has very set criteria and so on. So 80% of the people who die by suicide, if you do a review of those, take a close history from their loved ones, you'll find 80% would be suffering from clinical depression. In many cases, the depression may have been short-lived, maybe a few weeks or months. In many other cases, it may have long history. But worryingly, for Pakistan and for many countries, this depression is not recognized in the majority of people don't seek help for various reasons. Suicide does not happen in a pathway. It never does. What you may read in the newspaper or see on the TV that this person came home, failed exam, she was shouted at by a father, and then went and took some poisons. It doesn't happen like that. There is always a pathway to suicide, because what may have led to the suicide may be triggered that finally stopped. More likely than not, something else has been going on for some time in that person's life. Okay, so there will be factors in the person's life, Ellie's life events, UAE's unemployment, lack of social support. This may make a person feel down, depressed, and so on. If the person then starts getting depressive thoughts, particularly hopelessness. Hopelessness is a very important factor. So people may be depressed, but they may be hopeful. But if they become depressed and they become hopeless, design bebasi, then that becomes a really significant red flag. Now needy. Okay? So when they start getting depressive thought, that kind of takes them into an area where they start thinking that I might as well be not here. That is what triggers this suicidal ideation and pathway. And this can germinate and go on if the person does not get any relief. That leads the person to start thinking of means for how to do it. Then look for the mean. And then once the person makes an attempt, the survival depends on many factors. The method they have used, the discovery of that person after they made the attempt, the quality of the medical services, how quickly they can get to medical services, and then how can they really sustain it. So all of these things depend post-attempt. So using lethal means like a gun or hanging, the chances of survival are much less than people who take overdoses of medicines. Okay? Now, if alcohol is introduced at any point during the pathway, it speeds it up because alcohol has got a disinhibitory effect. So it speeds up the whole process. On the other side, you have what are called thresholds of protection. So you may have all these problems going on, but you may also have protective factors or thresholds. And these may be, few and there may be others. These may be religion, maybe children, it may be family, it may be person's self-esteem, resilience, connectedness, employment, job, and so on. Because these are kind of things that give people self-esteem, self-confidence, a sense of belongingness, and self of connectedness. So these are protective factors, and for some people, religion might be the final factor. For other people, children might be the other factor. In my clinical experience, when people are very depressed and they say that I ask them what stops you, and a lot of times they say Islam mein guna hai, haram hai, or they may say bachcho ka kya hoga. And the corollary to this is when you read about mother jumping into the river with the children, poisoning the children and killing herself, which is called homicide, suicide. It is because they feel so despondent and desperate, and they feel the children are going to suffer because of my suicide or because they won't have anyone to look after them. They kill the children as well before killing themselves. This is a very extreme form of hopelessness. So, Joyner is a psychologist in the US. He came up with this theory, interpersonal theory, and he said three things are extremely important for suicide to take place. Of course, you may have many factors that lead the person onto the pathway, but at the final point, these three things are very important. The person must feel or would feel that they are a burden on others. बोझ है दूसरों के ऊपर, दूसरे समझ नहीं सकते हैं that they feel I'm a burden, so I must take myself up. Loneliness, alienation, isolation, they feel no one can understand them, no one is feeling as bad as I am, I must, and I can't keep on suffering like this. And the third thing is, it requires a degree of fearlessness to take that extreme step. Okay, so these three things have to be present. If a person only feels burden on the others, but he or she has a good support system, that's a protective mechanism. Or if the person feels they can't do something like this, then they most likely will not. So these three things have to be present at the final point, tipping point. So this is very roughly what is a suicide map. Some countries like Russia is very high, North America, Australia, India, it's middle. And then in the light yellow is where Pakistan is, which has low, supposed to be low suicide rate. Except that the rates of Pakistan are estimates because we don't collect data nationally. So what is happening in Pakistan related to what's happening in the rest of the world? It's very under-researched. We don't do good research in Pakistan. We do not know what are the national figures for a country. We do not report to the World Health Organization. And the reasons why we we don't have this, it's partly religious because it's very strongly condemned in Islam. It says, do not kill yourself. And the suicide or attempted suicide is still criminalized in Pakistan. So if one was to make an attempt and survive, we can have an FIR registered against them, and they can be prosecuted. They can be then sent to jail for 1 year and charged 10,000 rupees. Okay, so this is still criminalized. Recently, it's been the bill has been passed by the Senate to decriminalize it. Pakistan is one of the 20 countries where it's still criminalized. Islamic Ideology Council, but it's now lying with the National Assembly, and we don't know whether the National Assembly is going to break up anytime soon or next year or whatever. But they have it has been introduced and debated and passed. So that's, but at the present time, it's criminalized. So all suicide cases and attempts are taken to medical legal center. In Karachi, there are 3: Jinnah Hospital, Civil Hospital, and Basi Shaheed. But people, the very poor, very serious ones go to these centers. Everyone else go to private hospitals. South City, APU, Patel, OMI, and so on. Where these hospitals don't label them as self-harm, they label them as a medical condition accident. This also leads to poor data on self-harm cases. And there is a great deal of social stigma. There's shame, there's difficulty when people don't want to talk about it. They do not seek help after they've survived an attempt. They want to keep it in the wraps. And so the underlying issue that led to the attempt remains unresolved. So from what we know in Pakistan, from WHO, the World Health Organization, it is estimated that about 20,000 people kill themselves in Pakistan every year. At least in 2019, that was the figure. More males than females. About 2 lakhs to 4 lakh people make an attempt but survive. And about 2 million to 4 million people would be getting thoughts of suicide every year in Pakistan. This is kind of the quantum of the problem that we're dealing with. But we do know it happens regularly across all the provinces, cities, all religion, all sects, Shia, Sunni, Barelvi, Deobandi, everyone. Social class, very rich families, middle class, the lower class. Has the incidence increased? Probably it has, but there's also much more awareness now. And non-reporting is very high, particularly from the rural areas. We don't know very much about what's happening in rural areas where the majority of our population live. Young in Pakistan are much more vulnerable to suicide than the elderly. In fact, suicide in the elderly is very low in Pakistan, which is again in contrast to what we see in the West, which is a really good thing. It tells you a lot about a very strong family system, which is a good thing. In the West, social isolation for the elderly is a major risk factor. Gender, there are more males than females in Pakistan. But if you look at marital status in females and gender, you will find that actually young married females are more at risk of suicide and self-harm in Pakistan than males. So it is very interesting. Young married females, young, under the age of 30. And the 3 most common methods in Pakistan again are hanging, poison, and use of firearms. Reasons: mental illness is very high in Pakistan, depression is under-recognized and under-diagnosed and under-treated. Social adversity is very high in Pakistan, and very few people who die by suicide are in contact with mental health services, because the mental health services themselves are so few and rudimentary. Alcohol is very rare, and the majority of the cases of self-harm and suicide particularly, is in the lower socioeconomic classes. So, in Pakistan, poverty is very high, and we know that almost 50% of the population live below the poverty line or around the poverty line. But not all poor people kill themselves, only a minority do. The reason is because the minority who do so develop mental health problems. That makes them more vulnerable. And so when we look at alleviating poverty, we should also look at providing more access to mental health services. Mental illness, it's underestimated, and it is got a strong association with suicide rates. Religion seems to be losing its predictive effect, although it's very strongly condemned in Islam. But it's the socioeconomic factors and religion which has got a very complex relationship. And so this appears to have been imbalanced. While religion is protective, but if the socioeconomic factors, poverty increases, then the effect of religion on Islam increases. What is the relationship between marital status? I've talked about young married females being more at risk. If you look at this figure, you will see that two things. One, if you look at the last figure, this is looking at the community-based studies. The very high figures for depression and anxiety, common mental disorders, 37 in one, 51 in one, and so on. Very high. If you extrapolate that of 220 million people, these are millions of people. But if you look at the rates of depression in women are very high, 2 or 3 times more than in men. And this is what is leading to psychological mobility in women, and this is translated into suicidal behavior. And then marriage itself becomes a very strong risk factor for young married females. Why so? Because the age of marriage for young women in Pakistan, talking not only of the educated class but the whole country, is low. And there is a lot of pressure on females to have children early on the marriage, to have male offspring, joint family system, problems with the in-laws. Domestic violence is very high in Pakistan. Many girls cannot complete their education, they're not allowed to work. So all of these make them much more vulnerable to depression, and then some of them go on to indulge in suicidal behavior. So, but if they survive the first 10, 12 years of the marriage, then things kind of settle down. Children grow up, some of the initial stages of marriage, the pressures they have, they kind of settle down. And then the risk decreases with age. But the first 5, 10, 12 years are extremely stressful for the female in Pakistan. So unlike the West, where marriage is protected, it is a risk factor for young women in Pakistan. And it calls into question what we need to do. And it's not just the marriage in young females, but simply being a female in Pakistan is a risk factor. We did this study to look at what are the factors, and when we controlled everything, we found out that gender itself was a disadvantage, independent of other factors, level of education, socioeconomic status, marital status, and so on. So, and we know this. We know from our own households and our society of women's situation in Pakistan. So when you talk about suicide prevention, it has to be multi-level, it has to be interdisciplinary. At the country level, you really have to have not just mental services, but you have to have all of these different services working together. Education, social services, police, law, and so on. Very briefly about, I hope we can address them in question and answers, how to recognize someone who may be at risk of suicidal behavior. So any change that you know of a person on his or her normal behavior, any change from there is a red flag. If you know this person is someone who's humorous, makes people laugh, is always happy-go-lucky, and suddenly you find this person is very withdrawn. It's not their normal selves. That's a red flag. So something's going on in the person's life. In an education institution, if they're missing classes, the grades are falling, if the appearance changes, they're not as deep about the appearance, and so on. It's again a red flag. Something is going on. It does not mean this person is on a suicide pathway, but something is going on in the person's life. Something is troubling this person. Or if the person is talking about specific problems, either problems in the house, problems with friends, problems with teachers, problems in studies, grades, whatever. They talk about specific problem and they can't find a way out, and they seem to be in a conflict situation, but that's something to take seriously. If they're expressing hopelessness, now maybe which may nothing can be done. I cannot do anything about this. I've tried everything, nothing is working. That's again a red flag. Or if they are expressing suicidal thoughts directly, sharing it with you, sharing it on social media, as many young people are doing now, or sharing them with messages, WhatsApp group, and so on. These are all red flags. Okay, one has to, like I said, it does not mean the person is suicidal, but something is troubling this person, and this, if it's allowed to germinate and there's no resolution of that, it can lead this person up that pathway. Firstly, what you can do if you do find someone is troubled or expressing suicidal ideas, if you do feel this person may be at risk, stay with the person physically, or if you're at distance, at least stay connected with this person on media, WhatsApp, whatever. Listen more, talk or advise less. This is crucial. The person who's troubled and has got several conflicting things going on, it's important to just listen to the person, not to be in the role of advising, do this, do that, and so on. It's very, very important to be non-judgmental, non-critical. How can you think like that? You've got everything going for you. Look at this. You've got a beautiful family. Look at your children. So it really doesn't help at that time to use these, to invoke these kind of things, because it will just make the person's life more strong. Because many times the person can't help having these thoughts. So non-judgmental, non-critical is very important. You can certainly ask them what is troubling them and what is behind this. So the more that you can help them to talk about what is troubling them, the better it would be for you to understand what is happening. So exploring is very important, but trying to avoid difficult issues. For example, issues around sexuality, drug use, physical relationship with someone. All of these things are very important, but people hesitate to discuss these things because they feel they can't do anything about it. But with a little bit of training, basic counseling skills, if you help this person, encourage this person to talk about it, then it helps. Seek advice. If you are with someone who is showing signs of mental distress or suicidal ideation, seek help. If you're a student yourself, seek help from counselors. If the counselors feel it's beyond them, seek help from mental professionals. It is very important. And ask this person what helps, what may help in the future, what do you think can help? You may say nothing can help. Then if you explore, you will always find something that can help. If you do, with the person's permission, get them to accept the fact that they need professional help, and then offer to make the appointment, and then offer to accompany them and do accompany them. That appointment, that's very important. And if a person is really expressing suicidal ideas or is imminently suicidal, then it's one of the few situations where you can break confidentiality. Okay, it's very important that you talk to someone close to someone else, not just take the responsibility yourself. Talk to someone in confidence with that person, making sure that that person doesn't break the confidentiality, because you may lose the person who is suicidal. But it's one of the few situations, if it comes to that you seek help. What is the role of faculty? Well, faculty, students spend anything between 4 to 8 hours or even longer in the institution. Faculty are really the surrogate parents, the way I see it. You have a set of parents at home, and then you've got a set of parents in the institution. Good institutions have a mentor, about 6 to 8 students who are really the surrogate parents. They should always be available, should be responsive. Again, they must be non-judgmental and non-critical. It is very, very important for faculty to train in basic counseling skills, where you listen more, learn how to explore, and talk and advise less. That's very important. An empathetic approach goes without saying, and being compassionate, which I hope all of English faculty are. But these are extremely important attributes, other than their qualifications and their expertise, the soft skills, the human skills they must have, and they deal with young people in their midst. What is the role of the university? I think the most important thing is creating a culture which is supportive, which is friendly, which is non-threatening. It is not overtly or overly disciplinarian. This is very important. It's a user-friendly university. People, if they run into problems, whether it's academic or psychological or personal, they can go and seek help without being judged, without being reprimanded. That is very important. But you must also have services. It's really, really good to see these 2 counselors here. Confidential counseling services which are accessible, trained, qualified, and they must be supported to get more training and higher qualifications. And they must be able to liaise with the academic faculty, which I'm sure you do, because we problems that do with grades and being suspended and so on. And a collaborative approach along with the student must be done, which is to the best, which should be the best outcome of the students. And you should have an implemented version, which I hope you do, so that you can refer and seek advice as well. Ideally, all education institutions, other than what they're teaching, the professional skills they're teaching, whether it's school or colleges, must have a parallel life skills program, which should be both for students and for teachers. And I'm sure you know about these life skills programs, which have things like stress management, healthy communication, conflict resolution, and so on. This is something that prepares students not only for what's happening at the current life, but also for the future as they go into professional life. But we don't do this, and many students run into problems or later on in the professional life. So, the number one, despite all of what I've said, the number one suicide prevention strategy is connectedness. Remember that suicide happens in isolation. Except for some public suicides, people jumping off the Minar in Pakistan or setting themselves on fire in front of the National Assembly, most suicides are isolated events. The person feels extremely lonely and isolated. So the number one suicide prevention strategy is connectedness. If you know people, reach out to them. The person is connected, is not isolated, the chances of them running into mental issues and suicide is less. And the number one line of defense, the first line of defense against suicide is family, friends, or colleagues. Why? Because these are the people who know that person more than anyone else. Because you're meeting them regularly. You can see the changes in them, you can understand, you know their characteristics, what pleases them, what makes them stressed, what makes them angry. So you know that. So that is the first line of defense. And this can also be the first or the most significant stressful if you're rejected by family, friends, and colleagues. So it works both ways. The closer the person is, if you reject the person, then the effect of that is much more than if you just know this person in passing. So what this really means is we really have to improve our communication with our family members, and friends, and colleagues, make sure that we're not being critical, that we're not hurting them, we're not using the language that hurts them, and knowing what this person is like. And if you look at the universal factor, we really have to reclaim our humanity. We've lost that. We've lost our humanity. We become selfish creatures. We don't care what's happening. And so, on a wider scale, on a global scale, this is what we need to do. So thank you very much. I'll stop here, and happy to take any questions. Thank you.